Good morning and welcome to Rising. Thank you so much for joining us on this Tuesday morning. We are anticipating a great deal of snow this afternoon, I understand.
Big snowfall in Washington, D.C., but we are free of snow so far.
You know, everybody panics so much about this incoming snow. I'm still planning to go various places in my car today because I'm from the cold, distant, isolated, dreary north of our great country.
A rugged Michigander, but
Yes.
You didn't bring your scooter in today.
No, we left the scooter at home.
So you got to draw the line somewhere.
Yes,
in any event, let's get to it. Robbie, what's on your radar?
I think we're going to argue about this one. Now, fresh off targeting USAID, an agency that spends billions of dollars overseas in the form of foreign aid, Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency is next expected to gut the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB. I say good riddance. The CFPB is a business-killing monstrosity that makes services more expensive for consumers and is, quite by design, unaccountable to Congress. Musk recently tweeted CFPB RIP, making clear that he would like to kill the agency. And he has President Donald Trump's support. In a statement, the White House described the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau as a, quote, slush fund in support of radical advocacy groups. Quote, the CFPB has long functioned as another woke, weaponized arm of the bureaucracy that leverages its power against certain industries and individuals disfavored by so-called elites. Supporters of the organization were furious. Former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi tweeted, by freezing the CFPB, the Trump administration is dismantling critical consumer protections that return billions of dollars to taxpayers. Let's be clear, Republicans are enabling financial predators to rip off hardworking Americans to reward their billionaire donors, end quote. Now, people who don't know very much about the agency might be tempted to agree with Pelosi. After all, consumer protection, that sounds like a worthwhile goal, right? But it's important to take a closer look at what CFPB actually accomplishes. The organization was originally the brainchild of Elizabeth Warren and came into existence in 2010 in response to the financial crisis. Importantly, the agency was structured as an independent bureau of the Federal Reserve. In my radar yesterday, I explained why many libertarians like myself are distrustful of the Fed, which operates outside congressional overview and has tremendous power to affect the money supply. Well, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is just as sheltered from congressional oversight and then some. As a result, the CFPB often makes rules for businesses and financial institutions that were never approved or recommended by legislators. For instance, during the last few days of the Biden administration, the CFPB issued a rule that prevents credit reports from considering medical debt when they issue a credit score. Look, I'm sympathetic to people who owe medical debt, and I advocate reforming the healthcare system. But isn't it kind of crazy for the government to tell a private credit score issuing organization that they are not allowed to consider whether an individual owes significant medical debt when calculating their credit? Isn't that kind of like telling, I don't know, a property manager that they aren't allowed to ask prospective renters whether they make enough money to pay the rent? Now, keep in mind, this prohibition on including medical debt was never debated, discussed, or voted on by anyone in the legislature. It's simply something the CFPB decided on, but it has the force of law. It lacks democratic accountability. You can't vote for or against the politicians who implemented it. It's exactly the kind of thing that Trump and Musk and DOGE are working against. As George Mason University economist Veronique DeRougy, a friend of mine, explained in a recent article arguing for the organization's entire abolition, it uses rules on home mortgages. The rules on home mortgages that the CFPB implemented end up making it harder to qualify for loans if you are self-employed or have a non-traditional source of income, ultimately pushing these borrowers toward non-qualified mortgage loans and higher rates. DeRougy writes that the agency's crackdown on credit card fees led to higher interest rates and fewer card options for lower-income consumers. In the payday lending industry, the CFPB's meddling has pushed vulnerable consumers toward predatory alternatives, end quote. That's by design. The philosophy of the CFPB is that people are too stupid to know what kinds of financial arrangements work best for them. In practice, it makes it more difficult for low-income people to get loans, to qualify for credit cards, to buy houses, because the CFPB is imposing costs and restrictions on financial institutions that make it prohibitively difficult for those businesses to provide their services to low-income people. Now, there are costs to all these regulations, by the way, costs that businesses always and everywhere pass on to you and me, the consumer. In the name of protecting consumers, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is actually making their lives much, much more difficult. If financial institutions are engaged in outright fraud or deception, that's illegal, and there's already a regulatory agency to police them, like the Federal Trade Commission. The CFPB, on the other hand, just makes financial transactions and services more expensive and less available to low-income people. Donald Trump and Elon Musk are putting consumer welfare first if and when they decide to kill it.
Oh, Robby. Oh, we're going to have a big disagreement on this one.
Give it to me, Niall.
Well, here's the thing. I think that basically the arguments here are being made on behalf of the financial services industry, which always wants as little regulation and scrutiny as possible. So you described the CFPB as a business-killing monstrosity. One of the cases that it has been most to the fore in recently was the Wells Fargo case of malfeasance, where 16 million accounts were subject to illegal practices, basically being nickel and dimed, having fake charges applied to them and things like that. I looked up before this segment the most recent enforcement actions that the CFPB had taken, so I couldn't be just accused of cherry picking something like the Wells Fargo thing. So the last four were Wise PLC, a British-based provider of remittance services and prepaid cards. It had advertised incorrect fees regarding ATM charges and was fined. Equifax, the credit reporting company, failing to investigate disputed charges, including when people said their credit was being hit by identity fraud, by other people making charges or posting charges on their behalf, fined about $15 million. Honda Finance, telling people that they could defer payments, and when those payments were deferred, reporting those accounts as negligent and hitting their credit card, or their credit rating, I should say. And then Block, which is the owner of Cash App, inefficient scrutiny of fraud, and when people reported fraud, there were no telephone customer service representatives to report it to. They were fined a large sum of money, $130 million. These are actions that are taken to protect ordinary people against predatory practices on the part of the financial industry. And that is an important role to play, and the CFPB is to the fore in playing that role.
What do you think those financial institutions do when they have to pay those fines? They pass the cost on directly they just increase the price of the services they're offering.
Right.
Or they shutter, and then ideologically, what I don't like about the organization, they'll say this kind of, the credit card company is saying, or the credit score calculating agency is saying, we would like to offer the service. A low-income person is saying, we're willing to pay for this service. And the government is coming and saying, no, you're getting ripped off, man, don't do this. Well, you consent and you consent, it's none of your business.
But in these instances, that is not what is happening. In the instances of, for example, applying inaccurate ATM fees, or saying to people, yeah, you can defer payments and then reporting accounts as negligent, that is not some business transaction where two consenting parties agree to something that we as individuals might or might not think is wise. That is people being ripped off. And your argument about what happens with the fines is in effect an argument that financial institutions or any other business should never be fined because they just pass the cost on to the consumer. We can't have, well, how are we going to punish them then? I mean, if we want to throw them in jail instead, that's fine.
Let's not punish ourselves. We're punishing ourselves. We should
make
it easier to do business.
Anybody for anything ever, because the cost is pushed to some other party.
If you are wronged by some kind of institution, there are systems to bring them to justice in the civil system. They got to pay you. This is not a. This is an unaccountable bureaucracy that purports to speak on your behalf. Micromanaging how financial institutions do their business in a way that makes the service more expensive for you, or cancels the service you yourself want. Again, a substantial aspect of this is credit card services or loan services being shut off for low-income people because they have to pay very high interest rates for them because these are risky loans to be made to low-income people. And so yeah, it's an arm and a leg for you, but if that's what you agree to do and you need that service, it's not the government's business to say, no, we don't think you should have that service.
I think that the reason for the CFPB's existence is because predatory and abusive and misleading practices are so widespread.
Well, then let Congress pass a law. That's the other part of it. This is just, again, it's a board of people operating wholly independently from Congress under the purview of the Federal Reserve. These rules, these policies aren't being debated or approved by anyone in Congress. It's just a rogue agency doing whatever it wants with no oversight.
Defending the common people from the predatory nature of the financial.
Yeah, I love love having the services we use being made more expensive by government.
Well, they're being made more expensive by people who aren't telling you the truth about the charges you're incurring.
Now, I think the people not telling the truth about these charges is often the CFPB. We'll see what happens with that. More Rising coming up next. Stay tuned.